Hey, it's Tech. Welcome to Off the Cuff. Today is part one of a two-part mini-series on the best average theater of 2016. Let me tell you what I've done. I went to go see Star Wars The Force Awakens 5 times so far. 4 of those were in 2 days and were specifically for this video or these videos. My goal was to take a look at what are the current average digital theater technologies that are out there and see how their experiences compare, which is why I chose the same film. That way the experience should be consistent, or the source material would be consistent between films. The last time I did it this large of a comparison was about 5 years ago. I did it with Tron Legacy to see how the different 3D technologies and viewing experiences were. Now it's 5 years later, technology has improved, there's some new things on the market, and I wanted to be able to see just generally with what most people, no matter where you were, would have access to, how the different technologies would change your viewing experience. So in this video, I want to talk specifically about resolution and audio, whereas in my next video, the next part is going to be specifically about 3D. So here we're going to be talking about 4K and IMAX and Dolby Atmos and surround sound and a little bit about Dolby Cinema. And then next time we're going to talk about Real D and IMAX 3D and Master Image 3D, Expand D, and Dolby 3D, which are the primary 3D exhibition techs. So the reason that this is important is with the history of digital cinema and the advent of digital cinema, the film experience has changed a lot. When films used to be delivered to theaters, they would come on film prints done by printing companies, and they were all essentially the same. Like, yeah, there's some variation in the quality of the sound system or the theater, like are you doing stadium seating or is it more of a larger venue style or what have you. But overall, the experience was the same in every theater because they're all using essentially prints from the same place. Whereas with digital theaters, that's not the case. Different projector technologies, the age of the projector, the resolution of the projector, the type of digital sound system, there's just a whole bunch of little factors with the digital age that have changed a lot about how the consistency of the movie-going experience. So without further ado, let's talk about what's there right now. If you live in North America, you've probably heard of IMAX. So we're going to dive into them first. Here's their logo. They're a Canadian company. They are, I'm covering the eye. They have been doing large format filmmaking, science films, educational films for years, since the 1980s. And when they are filming on IMAX, you're filming on 70 millimeter film, which is about this wide, and then they film it horizontally, so each frame is around this size. It's really cool. And then that's projected on massive screens. With digital IMAX, they have created a set of standards for digital theaters that improve upon the average experience. What they have is a floor-to-ceiling screen that's perforated, and that's important because the sound system is behind it. They have a custom sound and use custom mixes. Instead of using just one digital projector, they use 2 digital projectors that are overlaid to give twice the brightness of your average movie screen. And then when they do 3D, they're able to have essentially one dedicated projector for each eye, which is pretty cool. So that's how the IMAX installations work. So what is it like going to a digital IMAX? In the past, it hasn't been all that great. The alignment, you could have some problems with the alignment. I actually saw moire, which is the interference between 2 repeating patterns. These days, that's gotten a lot better. The alignment was perfect. I saw no moire, none of those digital artifacting. There was a problem that I saw in the IMAX theaters dealing with the polarization of light. When light is polarized, which I was watching it in IMAX 3D, when light's polarized, it reflects kind of differently depending on whether it's vertically or horizontally polarized off of the screen. And those perforations in the screen allowed you to see a repeating tension marks. So they'd be these blob blocks across the entire screen edge to edge. that would just reflect different amounts of light because of the polarization. And that kind of created this fixed pattern in front of the 3D, which is not that great. It's less of a problem in 2D, but you still get a little bit of it. But fortunately, since everything's in plane, that goes away. But the real clincher for the IMAX system is its sound. Oh my gosh, the IMAX sound is just so much better. One of the things that they do they have an enhanced bass response, as well as subwoofers that go down to 12 hertz. Now, if you know about the human hearing, you know that we can only hear down to about 20 hertz. But what these subwoofers that go all the way down to the 12 hertz range do with their 12 hertz LFE, low frequency effects, they let you feel things. So you feel these pressure waves on specific key moments. It enhances the action, it enhances the overall experience, this bass response. Their sound systems are pretty good. My only complaint about it was it might have just been the theater that I went to, or if this is how they calibrate them. They didn't calibrate the highs properly. They left their X-curve flat. You should have a roll-off in the highs when you calibrate a theater, because otherwise the way that the theaters attenuate the low frequencies makes it so that when everything's properly balanced and flat, the highs end up really sharp in your ears. So it's really high hisses and pops and just this really piercing high frequency effect. I adapted to it pretty quickly, but at first it was a little shocking. But then again, I am trained to listen for things like that. So, take it as it will. It could have just been a problem with the calibration, though this was a new theater, so theoretically they should have been calibrated recently. Anyway, overall, the IMAX experience, the IMAX Digital experience is basically the best digital theater experience you're going to get, with all the technologies that I've seen, with the exception of Dolby Cinema, which is only in a couple of locations in North America, a handful of them around the world, but will become more prevalent because that's HDR. It's going to become more widespread. That's going to beat out the current IMAX tech. But IMAX 2K technology, which is pretty much most of the digital technologies, is one of the best that you're going to get for any of the theaters, and I would give it an A grade. For reference, an average digital theater with 2K projection and 5.1 surround sound, I give a C, because C is their average, right? So IMAX, I rank A for 2K. If it's a 4K IMAX, the IMAX is currently replacing the digital IMAX projectors in a lot of their installations with 4K laser projections. Those get an A+ rating. They are amazing. You get the benefits of the higher resolution, the larger screen size, and the incredible sound system. It is great. But remember, we're going to talk about 3D next week, and that might change your opinion on whether or not to go to an IMAX 3D, because it does suffer when it goes 3D. Second bit of technology I wanted to talk about is 4K. 4K resolution means that you have about 4,000 pixels horizontal width by 2160 high versus the standard cinema, the average digital cinema, which has 2K resolution. Now I went to, because I have the Cinemark theater chains nearby, I went to the Cinemark XD theaters, which are their extreme digital. They're essentially an IMAX competitor. They have floor-to-ceiling screens, wall-to-wall screens, larger screens, closer to the audience, upgraded sound systems, and 4K projection. And overall, the 4K projection, Star Wars wasn't delivered in 4K, so I didn't get to see it. Which it meant that I couldn't really compare the 4K. Now, since I work in 4K every day, I can tell you that if you get the chance, watch it in 4K, because 4K is gorgeous. You have 4 times as much spatial detail. That's twice for vertical and twice for horizontal. So you have 4 times the spatial detail in the frame. It really makes a huge difference in all of the depth that you can see in terms of what's in the image. I love 4K. So if you can find a comparison, AMC has some comparisons. I was trying to look up, I couldn't find any for Carmike or Regal, or maybe your other local chains might have some, but if you can look up, find a 4K theater, that's going to be better. But again, it wasn't quite as good as the IMAX. It's a little cheaper. I watched it in 3D, and the light cutoff, because it was using a single projector was a lot higher on that, so it wasn't as bright of an image as the IMAX is, and that gives more detail through the darks and lights, which is why that brighter in the IMAX is good. It's kind of an intermediary between standard cinema and HDR, whereas the 4K extended digital or extreme digitals don't tend to be brighter necessarily. They still have essentially the same illumination per square inch or square centimeter, depending on which unit of measurement you're using. So it's better. You get higher pixel counts. I would give it, what did I give that one? I gave it about an A- to an A, depending on whether the film was in 2K or 4K. It's an A, solid A if it's in 4K, A- if it's in 2K. With that, the next thing I want to talk about is sound. Now, with sound, you have 5.1 surround sound, where you have 3 speakers in the front, left, right, and center, and then 2 around with subwoofers. 7.1 has the 3 in the front, 2 on the sides, and 2 behind you for a larger immersion surround. And some premium theaters will offer 7.1. Some standard theaters will offer 7.1. So it actually is beneficial to look up the theater, your local theater, call their guest services, see what they're sending it in, because 7.1, if it's mixed for that, is actually a little bit better than 5.1, and you can tell a difference, well, at least if you are a frequent moviegoer and enjoy that. But the real big advance in theaters that everyone is talking about is this, Dolby Atmos. Now, this is the cinema logo, this is the home logo from Dolby. Dolby has been a leader in digital sound for years. They had the first digital cinema sound, which was the Dolby Atmos, or not Atmos, Dolby Digital. Before that, they had Dolby Noise Reduction, which increased the fidelity of the analog soundtracks, and it is everywhere. You'll see it on your old tape cassettes. It just worked that well that it made everybody's experience better. So Dolby is known for their sound, and Atmos is incredible, or at least the first time I saw a film in Atmos, it was incredible. That was a couple years ago. When I watched Star Wars in Atmos, it was a little lackluster. Now, my thoughts on that, because I had seen things in Atmos and I knew what they could do, the idea, by the way, is that you have, instead of just the 7.1, you have around 64 speakers in the theater. And what they can do with that is by essentially throwing the sound, they can position objects or sound effects within the theater. It's also sometimes called 3D sound or immersive sound, because they can really make things look like they're going through and above and around and between you and that. The greatest scene I saw in that was when I watched the original Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, with Smeagol, or Gollum, as he was crawling about the cave. You could just hear him crawling around the theater, and it was really, really cool. Now, this time, when I watched Atmos, I don't think that Star Wars was actually mixed right for it. The reason being is it almost didn't use any of the surround channels. The music came from above, which is an Atmos standard, but beyond that, very few effects actually took place in the theater. Everything was coming from the screen. All the dialogue was still center channel mixed. The effects were almost all left, right, center channel mix. You very little surround sounds, and there was plenty of opportunities within the film to do this. Spoiler alert, so stop watching if you haven't seen it. But when the X-Wings are flying across the water at the assault on Maz's place as they're coming to the defense, there are X-Wing fighters theoretically in the world space behind the plane of the screen, above you, around you. You don't hear them. I mean, that's partially the filmmaker's decision that you wouldn't hear them, but at the same time, in Atmos, you should have heard them. You should have been able to position those fighters as being partly behind you, partly beside you, kind of above you. Same thing with the space battles, movement through different places. You didn't have the soundscape of echoey when you were flying through the Star Destroyer. You didn't have there's one scene where the TIE fighter is right behind the Millennium Falcon, which is, so we're looking at the Falcon. We know the TIE fighter is here and it's shooting, and we can see the laser bolts going at the Millennium Falcon, and you don't hear the TIE fighter behind you. You hear it in front of you, which is kind of a problem with Atmos. That spatialization is its trick. That's what makes it great. Other than that, it's just a much better sound system than your average one. So it still does improve the experience, but if it's properly mixed for Atmos, that's the real selling point. So if you can find a film that sounds good in Atmos, that's going to be beneficial. However, when I watched Atmos, it was in a theater that wasn't that great. It was 2K projection and Master Image 3D, which I'm going to talk about next week, but essentially it destroyed the image, Master Image 3D, and I was really unhappy with it. But the Dolby Atmos couldn't make up for that. So the better sound system and mediocre image doesn't make a difference. So, yeah, so that's Atmos. I would give their rating about a solid B. It does improve your movie-going experience, but not so much that you should really look for it unless it's accompanied by something else like 4K or high frame rate or, one of the other really good technologies. Then it can really accent a film. So that for this episode, that's really what I wanted to cover was IMAX, because those are common, 4K because you can go and find those pretty much anywhere, and Dolby Atmos because it's becoming more and more common as new theaters are built and upgraded. On the horizon, things you should look out for this year that are going to become more common are Dolby Cinema, which has Dolby Vision projection, which is HDR. Now, I talked about HDR near the end of December in my Off the Cuff, so if you want to learn about that, go there. That's really going to revolutionize film. It's just going to make it so much better, and I wish Star Wars was playing in Dolby Cinema in LA, and I couldn't get down there. It's far and expensive for me to go and watch it there, but having seen lots of stuff in HDR, having graded in HDR, I know that it would have looked amazing, and I can hardly wait for that to come to our common theaters. The other technology that as projectors are replaced is going to become more common is laser projection. Laser projection uses lasers to illuminate the imaging plane rather than a fused quartz xenon lamp. The fused quartz xenon lamps are full spectrum bulbs, which is okay, except that you have to have color filters in order to reduce them down to red, green, or blue primaries. And when you do that, you get a lot of bleed, that kind of a hump shape around the color that you're looking for. And that can kind of create muddled colors. I mean, they're still really good colors, but they're not perfect colors. Whereas with laser illumination, you're dealing with pure frequencies, either created by a single laser or through a combination of multicolored lasers, and they look incredible because they're close to pure frequencies for each of your red, greens, and blues, and that makes a huge difference in what colors it can do. They're the only screens, they're the only viewing technology right now that can do all of BT 2020, which is the largest color space essentially that we can create because of the limits of like physics. So, look for those if you can find any of those other theaters. Again, my recommendation is that if you want a better experience, go IMAX. Short of that, go 4K, and then lastly, add Atmos to your thing. But, digital projection is still pretty good no matter where you are, and the biggest advantage it has over film is that it doesn't degrade with repeated viewings. The exception is a dollar theater. Do not go to a dollar theater. I give them a D- grade because most of them use secondhand projectors with burned out pixels or fixed image noise patterns or faded colors, and they will use broken sound systems. That's a big problem. You don't want to hear crap. I've been in a dollar theater with like broken cones, and so they're just like no high response on that one speaker, and it's just sticks out like a sore thumb. So digital theaters, that is for resolution and audio, the best average theater experiences that you can find in 2016. So if this is next week, click on my face. I'm going to put a link here. If not, wait till next week, and I'm going to talk about the best 3D technologies of 2016 in part 2. And so until next time, I'm Tech Adams saying keep thinking, and thanks for watching.